Welcome back, hikers, to another weekly edition of the Q&A here on the channel, Follow Bigfoot, where I am answering as many questions that I can each and every week. If you have a question for next week's Q&A, place them below in the comments section, and I'll do my best to try to answer as many as I can. You can also send me an email of your question to followbigfoot@yahoo.com. Now, just like we've done in weeks in the past, I'm going to start off with the leaderboards with the Million Step Challenge. We actually had one person hit their million steps already, and it was only about 28 days, which is just phenomenal. If you're not familiar with the Million Step Challenge, basically what we did is we kicked off 2018 with a challenge from January 1st to March 31st. Can you step 1 million steps? We got about 150 people that are vying to compete in this thing, which is all for fun, and it's really to kick off 2018 as we are getting into the hiking season here. And basically how the math works out, you got to step about 11,000 or so steps a day on average in order to hit this million steps in the first quarter. So anyway, that's what the challenge is. But starting off here, our top 10 leaders for week number 4. Number 10, Patrick Schroods, 148,000. Number 9, Clay Van Eyck, 163,000. Number 8, Harry Seifert, which Harry stepped 166,000 steps. Then we got Freddie VDM, which is coming in at 175,000. Number 6, Jason Lowe, 177,000. Then our top 5. Number 5, Howie Miller, 194,000. Seth Keen bounced back in a huge way, 204,000. We got Joe Grimaldi, 245,000 steps. Terry Root, 251,000 steps. And then number 1 for the third straight week, Phil White, 269,234 steps. And Phil White is the first person to complete our Million Step Challenge in 27 days, which is 37,037 steps a day. Incredible. So let's go ahead and get into the first week's question. How large of a bear bag should I use on the PCT or AT? All right, let's talk about the AT first. So on the AT, I personally use the Z-Packs bear bag, which is about a 15-liter sack. I didn't have any issues with having enough space, or not having enough space rather, to accommodate all the food during some of my longest stretches. I think the most food that I had in there at one time was about 6 days. Now, I would say the average resupply time on the AT is probably somewhere around that 5-day range, but some folks might carry up to 7 to 8 days worth of food. So it really depends on how much food that you are intending to carry during some of the longer stretches. The average, again, is probably somewhere in that 4 to 5 day range. So that's what worked out for me, and I would say a lot of people typically have somewhere around that capacity. Now on the PCT, it's likely that you're going to have longer stretches of when you're going to resupply, just because you don't have the convenience that you do on the Appalachian Trail. I still think that a lot of people use that Z-Packs bear bag, but there are sections of the PCT, primarily really the JMT section, that you have to have a bear canister. So not only do you have to have a bear bag, but you're going to have some sort of bear canister during that part of the Sierra. So it really kind of depends on what part of the PCT that you are referring to. But again, I think somewhere in that 15-liter range is probably going to suffice for most people. I have an important question. I'm a supervisor in a government job and can't imagine losing my pension. My job sometimes grants people a leave of absence to get more education, care for family members, etc. How can I convince them to give me 2 or 3 months off unpaid so I can do a long hike? Like, how can I prove that I will turn as a better leader, supervisor, employee? Well, that's a great question. I think that if I had the best answer, I would probably be asking my company right now for a leave so I could hike the PCT here this year. But I think that any person that you talk to that has done any of these long distance trails, and especially the Appalachian Trail, because that's probably the one that you hear the most of, people change. People change for the better. The experience they get on a long distance through hike is absolutely incredible. I know many people, and I would encourage many people that have done this, they should put that on their resume. The skill set that you need to be able to hike 2,200 miles and all of the things that you have to persevere through, whether it's the weather, whether it's tough days, long miles, the terrain, whatever it might be. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, but you got to persevere through all of these things, and it really challenges you mentally. And I feel that I am a better employee in what I do in my living because of the experience that I had on the Appalachian Trail, and I talk about it all the time. I tell people that. And so I think if you can start with something like that, a lot of people really have no clue what it's like to through hike a long distance trail. They don't even know that there's some of these long distance trails that exist out there. So part of it, I think, is just education. Like I remember when I put in my request to hike the Appalachian Trail, and originally I was only going to get about 13 weeks off, which was really, really tight. And I requested an extra 2 weeks unpaid off, and it wasn't approved until about a month before I actually left for the Appalachian Trail. And the reason why it wasn't approved is because my boss didn't really understand what I was doing. He thought that I was going to hike this trail and then come back and take a month off and just relax or go on another vacation or something like that. He didn't really understand and realize I was doing it and what it would take for me to do this, how much time I would be spending on the trail. Now, if anybody has any tips of advice for Mary, please place them in the comment section below. I would love to hear them as well. Hey Bigfoot, during your AT through hike, you wore sun gloves for most of it, if not the entire hike, but I haven't seen you wear them since your FKT or JMT hikes. With your experience, are they something you'd recommend, or did you change your mind about them? What were the benefits, the drawbacks? Thanks, and keep up the great videos. All right, so yeah, I wore sun gloves during most of my time out on the Appalachian Trail, and I actually think I ditched them sometime in the last section of the Appalachian Trail. So the benefits is that you're really protecting your hands from all the friction from your trekking poles. If you're not bringing trekking poles, you really don't need them, but that was really the intention that I used them for, was to be able to prevent blisters and just, again, all the things that happen with holding the trekking poles in your hands for extended periods of time. The drawbacks of the sun gloves, the reason why I actually got rid of them, I don't use them anymore, it was a pain in the rear end to have to take them off every single time that I'd have to go to the bathroom or when I would have to eat, because they would get really nasty. And they're not really that easy to take off because you're sweating. There's all kinds of perspiration on the gloves themselves. So trying to get them off was a little challenging. And then you'd have to put them back on. Now you're drinking a lot of liquids when you're out there on a through hike. So you're going to the bathroom quite a lot. And to take it off every single time, it just got annoying, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I think I lasted maybe like 15 or 1,600 miles with them on, and that's the primary reason why I just don't use them anymore. It's just not worth it. Now, the gloves did rip in certain parts somewhere about 1,000 miles in, so they did start to deteriorate as well. Now, after I ditched them, I did have some issues with some wear on my skin, primarily right in between my finger and my thumb. So I dealt with that a little bit, and typically I'd had to put some lotion or something like that when I would get into town, but I just dealt with it, to be quite honest. I haven't had any issues with my shorter hikes. Now, one thing I did do when I was on the AT that I remember is I put a little strip of Katy tape in the area that was kind of a hot spot with my trekking poles until it started to heal a little bit. Hey Bigfoot, I will be doing my second attempt of the AT this year, March 4th. Started the same time last year, but injury took me off quickly and ruined my attempt of 2017. My question is, what do you do to keep yourself occupied once you settled into camp? The time I spent last year on the trail was mostly raining and very cold. I found myself stuck inside my tent, just trying to sleep until the next day before the sun went down. Open to ideas, but I tend to be an introvert, and I don't really want to be connected to electronics to keep me busy, since that defeats the purpose of being outdoors for 6 months. What I personally would do is a couple things. Number one, I would be editing my videos. I would edit them on my phone and try to get at least a part of my videos edited. I usually did about 5 days for every video or so. So that's one thing that I would do while I would be in my tent. Now, for my Appalachian Trail through hike, I personally wasn't getting into camp until close to dusk. So I didn't really have a ton of time, but there were definitely times where I had some of that free time before the sun went down. And the other thing that I would do all of the time, every single night, was plan out my next day of my hike, my next week of my hike. Where's my next resupply? Maybe sometimes even where do I expect to spend maybe my next zero? I think that's something that's pretty common that you'll see out there on the trail, is looking ahead, whether I'm using Guthook's app or using AWOL's guide. But that was something that was always kind of fun, just to kind of see what I've done and what I expect to do, and just all the details. And then in my notes section of my phone, I would keep ideas. I would have all of these thoughts, all of these ideas, and a lot of them coming at night when I'm just sitting in my tent with nothing to do. And I try to capture those ideas, or else I would just lose them. I'd forget about them, whether they'd be ideas for a video, whether they're ideas for my hike, or maybe it's just something like for work, or something personally. I mean, it was about anything. I mean, you just have all the time in the world to think when you're out there on the trail. Out of the 2018 AT hikers who have been posting, do you have an early favorite? I do. And it is someone that actually hasn't posted anything on YouTube yet. The person that I'm referring to is called RTK, Return to Katahdin, but he's going with RTK is his name. His real name is Bruce, and he is in his mid-60s. He has been dreaming of through hiking the Appalachian Trail for about 40 years. And we first connected sometime, I think, early last year. He's been following me for quite a while. And he actually has a podcast that he's doing with Mighty Blue. If you're not familiar with Mighty Blue does an Appalachian Trail podcast. It's fantastic. I have been tuning into it, and I have listened to almost all of the episodes of his within the last about 3 or 4 months. But it's fantastic, and they did a spin-off of Mighty Blue's Appalachian Trail podcast with Bruce, which is called Returning to Katahdin. And I've been listening to every single podcast that Mighty Blue interviews RTK about his hike. They talk about everything, and I've really developed a connection with RTK. I'm really excited for his hike. Now, it also makes RTK interesting for me. You guys know how important, how much I love giving back to the trail community. RTK is attempting to try to raise the most money ever for the Appalachian Trail by a single person. His goal is to raise $250,000 for the ATC during his through hike. And he's off to a great start already. So I have been just tuning in every single Monday morning for his podcast with Mighty Blue. I'm getting really excited about his start. He actually starts in a few weeks, I think February 21st or 23rd. So it's coming up here, and I can't wait to follow him and join his journey. So that's my early favorite. One YouTuber that I have been watching and again feel a connection with is Gucci Girl and Grumpy is their YouTube channel. Grumpy is starting his through hike in about 2 weeks, and they post about a dozen videos, and I just find a connection with them. I find them very comical. I'm really excited for Grumpy's through hike. So that's another person too that is an early favorite for mine. I will link the information below about both RTK and Grumpy, so if you guys want to check them out, you can. I would strongly recommend that. We're going to finish this week's question with my favorite question of the week. What are the top 5 sights seen while hiking the AT or any other place? So I'm going to stay specific to the Appalachian Trail, and I thought about this a little bit, and I actually typed them down in my phone here. And these are things I think that just came to mind really fast. I was really trying to recall what I felt when I was seeing these different views and what was going through my mind. And I think if you watch my through hike, you'd probably agree with a lot of these. Now, the first one is Max Patch, which is in Tennessee. It is about 200 and something miles in, right before you hit Hot Springs. Max Patch is a special place for me because it's one of the first balds that you hit on the Appalachian Trail, and the day that I hit that, it was one of my better days on the trail up to that point. And it was beautiful weather. I had great weather on top of Max Patch, which a lot of people don't, or a few people don't. But I love Max Patch so much that me and Miss Bigfoot actually went back and visited Max Patch and did a hike up there last year on our way up to trail days. But Max Patch would be my first memorable site. My second one is, and this one might be a little cliche because everyone says this, but I truly feel this way, but McAfee Knob was probably the coolest sight that I saw in the first half of the trail. It's at mile marker 711, or at least it was when I was hiking the AT, and it was the first day I actually hiked with my German friends. I developed a bond with a couple of German guys, and we hiked together for 17 days. Absolutely incredible site. It is an easy hike to get up to. My third favorite site is Mount Musalak. Some people refer to this as Musalaki. I actually asked some of the locals that live in Gorham and in that area what they refer to it as, and they pronounce it Musalak. So, but you can call it Musalak, you can call it Musalaki, whatever. It is the gateway into the Whites when you're heading northbound, and you get to see Mount Washington. You get to see the Whites. You're going to see what you are hiking through for the next few weeks. And the White Mountains is something that most AT thru hikers really look forward to, and by the time that they are getting there, they're getting close to the end of their journey. So I remember sitting on top of Mount Musalak and just taking it all in. It was actually beautiful weather. I don't even think there was any clouds in the sky. I got to see everything. It was incredible, and to be able to sit there and just enjoy that moment and see what was coming. I literally was anticipating the White Mountains for 1,800 miles. So it was a great way to kick off the Whites. Now, number 2 for me is the Bigelows, which is in Maine. It is somewhere right around, I think, the 2,000 mile mark. I honestly can't, actually it might even be before the 2,000 mile mark, but right around that area. And the Bigelows is, if I recall right, one of the last big mountain ranges that you are going over before you get into the 100-mile wilderness. And it is probably one of the last more difficult hikes before the very end, which by then it's all adrenaline anyway. But it was just incredible sights coming out of, actually it was right after the 2,000 mile mark. It was just incredible. I think that I remember realizing once I got over the Bigelows that I was going to be able to complete my AT journey in my allotted time frame, which was 100 days. So it was also really special for me, really being able to realize that. But I spent probably an hour or hour and a half on top of the Bigelows just enjoying these sights. Again, I had great weather. I was able to see what I feel like all of Maine. Not able to see Katahdin yet. It was a little too far away from that. But that was definitely my number 2. And number 1 for me, and this one I don't think, this would be a hard one to beat, which was Katahdin. Climbing up Katahdin, the experience of climbing up Katahdin, and then seeing the end and the sight of the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail is something that I will never, ever, ever forget. It was absolutely incredible. Katahdin is such a unique climb. It was my favorite climb in the entire Appalachian Trail. There is something special about that mountain, and there's some technical climbing that you're doing a little bit on your way up, but it was special, and it will always be special for me as my number 1 site on the Appalachian Trail, and probably my number 1 site, period. So that wraps up the Q&A for this week. Again, if you have a question for next week's video, make sure you place them below in the comment section, or you can email them to me at followbigfoot@yahoo.com. Stay tuned for more sightings. We are actually about 2 weeks out from the Winter 4-State Challenge that I'm doing with Between the Blazes, the Hiking Viking. So that's going to be coming up here very, very shortly. So stay tuned for that and many more sightings. And remember to always follow Bigfoot.